the 7th of September with Sweden. Now, when we first thought about Sweden before February, we were looking forward to learning about Sweden's successes in politics, in health, in democracy, and diplomacy. And now we can welcome Sweden as a fellow member of NATO. So it's very exciting. So we hope to see you on the 7th of September back here. Now, a few days ago, I was informed that Ambassador Duric was called back to Belgrade for an urgent meeting, taking place actually today. And you know, this is a normal possibility for diplomats and, Scott, for program chairs. This happens, right? So we got to be ready. We are really grateful that his first counselor, Mr. Radomir Ilic, was willing to step up for the ambassador and speak to us tonight. So our program is still very much about Serbia. Mr. Ilic has been a first counselor of the Serbian embassy since 2020. He received a bachelor's degree from the University of Belgrade in 2007, and he joined the Serbian bar in 2010. He has experience in handling the legal and administrative and political policies related to Serbia's national reforms and to their joining of the EU, which is a top policy for their government. He also has experience with the best international practices and standards in the field of criminal justice. He's married, he lives with his wife and young child in Washington. And Mr. Ilic, I appreciate and admire your willingness to speak at short notice to us tonight, and I'm delighted to invite you to our podium, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight, to talk about my country, about Serbia, and about bilateral relations and the potential for cooperation between our two countries. My name is Radomir Ilic. I'm the first counselor of the Embassy of the Republic of Serbia in Washington. Like this?
Yep.
Is it better? Prior to this job, I was the Deputy Minister of Justice in Serbia for many years, and I participated in reforms in the field of rule of law, mainly dealing with the strategic approach in the fight against corruption. I also participated in the Brussels process, which has the task of normalizing the relations between Belgrade and Pristina. My task was the agreement and implementation of the agreement of the functioning of the judiciary in the north of Kosovo and Metohija. Tonight, we are in beautiful Annapolis, on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. Miles away from the southeastern Europe, the Western Balkans, and Serbia. Therefore, let's get a little closer to Serbia with the help of history and geography. Serbia is located in southeastern Europe, a little north of the far more famous Greece. In fact, roughly between the more famous Austria and Turkey. Yes, until 30 years ago, Serbia was part of the much better known Yugoslavia. From Belgrade, the capital of Serbia, the flight to Vienna takes 1 hour. But the flight to Istanbul also takes that long. If you find yourself at the Belgrade airport, you will not believe how London, Berlin, Moscow, but also Abu Dhabi can be close. In fact, right at the beginning, we come to the main political and geopolitical determination of Serbia. Serbia is at one of the crossroads of the Euro-Asian continent. The shortest route from Western and Central Europe to the Middle East and further to Asia leads through the hills of Southeast Europe. In Serbia, we have a joke. We build a house on the road, and then we get angry because of the sudden, unannounced visit. Serbs are in many ways a typical European people. However, with a bit of Oriental spices. In the Middle Ages, we had a large state with a developed culture. As a cultural heritage of the Middle Ages, we have beautiful monasteries and fortification preserved to this day. We made a bit of a myth of all of this. We are a typical European nation here. We lost the state in the Middle Ages with the Turkish conquests. We have lost continuity with the Western European countries for several centuries. That's where the Oriental spices in our character come from. Later, in the 19th century, we rebuilt our country according to modern European principles. Here are some interesting stories from the history of Serbia. Do you know that as many of 17 Roman emperors were born on the territory of Serbia? Everyone is the most famous Constantine the Great, born in the south of our country in the city of Niš. Do you know that Serbia is the first country in Europe after France to abolish feudalism? The Serbian constitution of 1835 was so advanced, establishing Serbia as a civil state on the legacy of the French Revolution, that Austria demanded its immediate repeal, and the Russian ambassador called this constitution an evil seed. Did you know that in the hall of the International Red Cross building in Geneva, there is a plaque with the inscription, "Be as humane as Serbia was as humane in 1885. It refers to the honorable behavior of the Serbian army in one of the many Balkan wars." Did you know that Belgrade is the most bombed European capital in the 20th century? In 1848, Stalin wanted to drag Yugoslavia behind the Iron Curtain. Yugoslav President Tito then said his historic no to Stalin. The Soviets wanted to conquer Yugoslavia by law. But the stubborn Yugoslavs got weapons from NATO, so Stalin gave up the war. This year, Serbia and the United States marked the 100th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations were established through the consular agreement and the trade agreement on the export of plums from Serbia to the United States. So it's more about not only plums but rakia, because you can get rakia from plums. Of those 100 years, at least 110 have gone great for us. In World War I, we were on the same side. Moreover, in 1918, President Wilson hoisted the Serbian flag on the White House in order to pay tribute to the Serbian people for their heroic attitude and sacrifices in the war. The United States sided with Serbia at the Versailles Conference and helped create Yugoslavia. In the Second World War, we remember the Halyard mission together, when Serbian guerrillas helped save American pilots shot down over Europe. After the war, Yugoslavia, although a socialist country, stood firmly with the values of the West and United States. In military terms, Yugoslavia was de facto a member of NATO. Unfortunately, our countries have lost mutual understanding in the 1990s, after the breakup of Yugoslavia. Then we touched the lowest political and economic relations. After the end of the Cold War, the world changed a lot. Serbia did not recognize the new movements in the world, which caused catastrophic consequences both for our country and for the relations between our two countries. Serbia needed time to recognize its foreign policy, to recognize itself in the region, in Europe, and in the world. Serbia's geopolitical position, which I talked about at the beginning, was just a burden. The leadership did not have enough wisdom to use the country's position at the crossroads and between great powers and use it for the country's progress. Today, the foreign policy of Serbia is a policy of friendly approach toward current partners and potential future. Our foreign policy lends a hand to the regional and international partners. Our strength in outstretched politics, in our political and economic stability, which we have achieved in previous years. Serbia has a strategic goal to become a member of European Union. Serbia is committed to joining the European Union as a political and economic community with which it shares the same goals and values, legal and political culture. For us, membership in the European Union means achieving internal political and economic stability and being ready to solve open bilateral problems with our neighbors. The space of peace, strong institutions of the rule of law, freedom and security will be significantly expanded. The Balkans are an area where crises are easily born due to the specific history of the region. Today, the Balkans are relatively stable because some Balkan countries are already members of the European Union, while the countries of the Western Balkans have a European perspective. It is a question of political stability in the region without European integration. Without the European integration, the Western Balkans are a potential place for a new crisis. On the contrary, the Western Balkans in the European Union may have a different perspective. Also, the traditional focus of the crisis on the borders of the European Union is the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. From there, crises easily spill over the European continent. One of the examples of such a crisis is the so-called migrant crisis. With the Western Balkans in the European Union instead of a potential place for creating crisis on its own borders, the European Union would have its members, the countries of the Western Balkans, which would now be a space for action and crisis resolution in the Middle East. Today, Serbia has the fastest growth economy not only in the region but also in Europe, stable political institutions, and as a candidate country for membership in the European Union, becoming a key factor of stability in Western Balkans. Just to confirm the fact of the fastest growing economy, according to the report IBM Global Trends 2020, Serbia is the leader in the number of vacancies for the fourth year in a row through foreign direct investments projects in 2019 in relation to the number of inhabitants. We are proud of them. In 2020, Serbia ranked first in Europe in the number of foreign direct investments in the relation to the size of the economy, according to a report of the Financial Times. In 2020, Serbia attracted $3.44 billion in foreign direct investments. This is more than half of the total foreign direct investments in Southeastern Europe in the same year. Today, Serbia is close to the upper limit of its growth. Our GDP growth is 6.6% per year. In 2021, growth was 7.5%. In the Eurozone, it was 5.2% in the same period. Despite the crisis caused by coronavirus, Serbia has managed to maintain growth and continue the trend of reducing public debt. For 2020 and 2003, the projected growth is 4.5%, which speaks to the sustainability of growth in the medium term. The IMF agrees with this. This year, the economic struggle is even greater due to the crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. Serbia wants to tear down artificial walls among the Balkan nations. Walls built on ideologies of the past, invented myths from the past, prejudice, repeated mistakes, self-destruction and denial of truth. To build bridges between the peoples of the Western Balkans on modern principles that exist in European Union. Let's use all advantages of wealth that the region has, from the single culture that emerged in the centuries of living together, to the common language we speak. You, our American friends, often see virtues in us, and we see only shortcomings in our region. For Serbia, a regional connection is one of the most important priorities. Connection that is infrastructural, trade, investment. We stand for a region of friendship, economic exchange, which is richer towards the European Union or in the European Union and the rest of the world. We are committed to a richer, more advanced and happier Western Balkans, which with its knowledge and skills with products appears on the world markets. This is why Serbia is the initiator of the Open Balkans project as a future network of companies, enterprising individuals, experts, scientists who will communicate, exchange experiences, travel and trade without barriers, borders, which still exist in Europe only in the Balkans, where the citizens of the Western Balkans have the most direct benefit. The members of the Open Balkans are Serbia, Northern Macedonia, and Albania. Montenegro will join soon, we hope. Our logic is, if the EU does not have a plan for the forthcoming enlargement to the Western Balkans, which is a catastrophic mistake that can be costly in the future, why not create a community in the Western Balkans that operates on the same economic principles as the EU? The Open Balkans Initiative is a great opportunity and instrument for the United States to strengthen its economic and political presence in the region. American companies are welcome in the economically united Western Balkans. The Open Balkans is not only an instrument for the strengthening the economy, but also an instrument for better rule of law, the fight against money laundering and corruption. Walls are being torn down by building roads, railroad bridges, opening airports and ports. Serbia is building its own network of highways. In the last few years, we have built 350 kilometers of highways. Another 750 kilometers of highways are planned to be built. But as a central country of the Balkans, it connects the entire region. Today, Skopje, Thessaloniki, and Istanbul are connected to Belgrade by highway. But these cities are now connected by highway to Budapest and then further to Europe. The highway to Sarajevo will not only connect Belgrade and Sarajevo. The Moravian Corridor, which is being built by American company Bechtel, will also connect Sarajevo with Sofia and Istanbul. That is our vision. Balkans that is connected by speed railways as a direct stimulus to trade and investment. The airport in Belgrade is being modernized, the airport in Niš is really working, and great improvements are waiting for it. Morava Airport has become a reality, a new cargo and passenger airport in the central Serbia that no one believed would come true. The number of passengers at the Belgrade airport increased from 3.1 million passengers in 2011 to 6.2 million in 2019. In 2014, there were only 1,000 passengers in each, while in 2019 that number reached 400,000 people. Serbia has declared its military neutrality in relation to the existing military alliances. Although Serbia is a military neutral country, it is ready for cooperation with other countries and military alliances. In order to strengthen regional security, we achieved the highest level of cooperation within the framework of NATO's program, Partnership for Peace. We emphasize the European Union's common security and defense policy as particularly important. Serbia has very significant cooperation with the Ohio National Guard. In the end, I will say a few words, mostly expressed in numbers about the cooperation between Serbia and the United States. The United States is one of the largest foreign investors in our country, with a total amount, according to American data, about $4 billion, and American companies have employed 20,000 people. There are 62 active businesses entities in Serbia, the majority owner of which is USA. Since 2001, the United States has invested approximately $1 billion in assistance to projects in Serbia aimed at improving the rule of law, fostering economic growth, assisting local communities, of which about $800 million through USA programs. In December 2003, the United States returned to Serbia the status of the most favored nation in trade, which means that products can be imported into the United States without or with minimum tariffs. I will end my presentation by reminding that the two most famous and most deserving Serbian Americans are the great world scientists Mikhail Putin and Nikola Tesla. People like them are an eternal bridge between the nations. And when it comes to politics, I will remind you to President Biden what he said. I remember in 2009, we agreed to disagree. I think today the situation with our agreement and disagreement is much better through dialogue and enhanced understanding for our positions regardless of disparity in the size of countries. We can find points of common interest. I will also add a few words. I didn't plan, but I've been speaking on this hotel before, and that's what I forgot, to write here. It's about our relations with Russia. That's the first, the China, and about all that thing when it comes about gas, energy that comes from Russia. You have to understand a bit our position and our historical ties with Russia, but for the first, it is linked with geography. So we are situated on the Balkans where we are, which we explained, something 2 hours flight to Moscow, 1 hour flight to Istanbul, 2 hours flight to London, so it's the same traveling from Belgrade to London and to Moscow. And how it was during the history. We always been far enough from Moscow and Kremlin not to harm us, but to help us. Some their interest in Balkans, but also common Orthodox tradition, etc., etc. But we always been far enough to be under Russian boots. We had only twice Russian army on our territory. First time it was in 1830, 1811. It was when Russian Tsar decided to help us in our first uprising against Turks. It was interesting. It was something like 2 battalions of Kazakhs coming. And when Napoleon really attacked Russia, they retreated, so we lost the war with Turks. And the second time was in World War II, and they've been in Serbia and Yugoslavia for a couple of months, and then they left. It's not like with Hungary, Poland, Romania, where they've been sitting for more than 50 years or always threatening. So our people, remembering how they helped us, let's say, in 19th century to rebuild our state. Then also, there are tales about Red Army that was fighting against fascism. And that's why we are a bit, how to say, in some way we love Russians, but at the same time, we never felt what some other people from Eastern Europe were feeling for decades. And then there is this thing about sanctioning Russia in this Ukrainian crisis. Serbia is the only country in Europe that didn't sanction Russia. One of the reasons we firmly do not believe in sanctions because in 90s our people was under awful Western sanctions. We think it is totally crazy for common people to suffer because it's not about the people, it's about the leadership. And if you think that people will really be against their leadership because of some sanctions, that is not true. We really uprised against Milosevic in 2000 after NATO bombed us. We said, is it really possible that this guy brought us to the war with NATO? But before that we had 10 years of sanctions that been something like uniting us. And so something like 60% of Serbian population is against sanctioning Russia. So could you imagine what would happen if we would really sanction Russia? That could make a huge backfire. That could make something like bringing totally right-oriented people to government, and Serbia would be far away from European integration, from some other possible integration, and that maybe be something like a totally destabilizing region. And the thing is that there is a huge, incredible understanding of this American government. That is something like a twice better understanding in Washington than in Brussels. It is incredible because in Brussels they usually know better what is happening on Western Balkans, but now there is, I can understand about that hysteria that is happening, but I think also they're not making some of their decisions because there's something Serbia should strengthen Russia, but what is happening with EU sanctions? Well, I would say nothing. They're sitting on multilateral conventions, thinking about that, but at the end we decided not to do that. That's what really happens. So it is extremely complex with Russia at the moment and with our position. We do respect territorial integrity of Ukraine because it is so much important with our fight for Kosovo and Metohija. So could you imagine, how it is hard for our diplomacy at the moment to explain Serbia's position, especially in Western world. And we can come back to this with your questions. About China, what we do with Chinese people, it's mostly trade. And you can't say it is bad because what United States is doing with China, well, it is trade. We have some amount of Chinese companies in our country, but our biggest partners are Germany and countries of European Union. I would say that something like how China is present, it's something like a 5%, not more. Unfortunately, I don't know the figures exactly, but we are not in any kind of debt with China, like some other countries are, and we are taking some of their credits for building highways, etc., but trying not to be in any kind of debt towards China. They have that project, Belt and Road. It is in a bit problem with this war in Ukraine at the moment because, okay, there are roads through to the Moscow towards Poland, but we'll see what is going to happen. That link through Kiev is totally, it's not possible to send goods anymore. That road to Turkmenistan, it's undeveloped. We'll see whether they're going to go on some sea roads. But the thing is that at the moment they have a special envoy. China has a special envoy in Middle Europe to explain their position about the war in Ukraine and to try to convince their partners now. It's not 70+1 because Lithuania went out, it's 16+1 to stay with the Belt and Road project. And for Serbia, it's how to say about trade, because we also have to build our economy. If we don't have strong economy, we will have total collapse. When I've been speaking with you, I've been speaking about Serbia, the diaspora here in States. Well, it's enlarging. Why? Because people are not satisfied with how they live in Serbia with their wages, and they say in states that are better. So could you imagine that our economy collapses, we wouldn't have any more young people to live in Serbia, you know? And that would be also a question what would happen with Balkan and Balkan countries, and it is the same thing with the region. Even Croatia, that is part of EU, well, people prefer to live in Germany or in States. In Bosnia, it is bad, you know, because the economy is quite poor in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also Northern Macedonia, etc., etc. That's why Open Balkans is one of the chances. And about this oil and gas comes from Russia, well, we are dependent, and we are 100% dependent from Russian energy, but also Germany and Poland are dependent, Hungary, and I think it is a process. I've been reading memoirs of one of our ambassadors who was ambassador here in the 80s, and he wrote that his talks with the Reagan administration were also about Yugoslav dependency from Russian oil. So it was 40 years ago, and it's still not resolved. Okay, I talked enough. Now it's...
Okay, thank you.